She saved an Apache warrior, and he returned as chief to claim her as his wife. The sun had barely risen over the crimson dunes of the frontier planet, and the wind already carried the bite of the cold. Emma adjusted her cloak against the chill, gripping the reins of her small wagon as she guided her few cattle along the narrow path. She had traveled these stretches many times, but today felt different. The sky was darker than usual, clouds swirling in a way that promised a storm. She scanned the horizon carefully, noting the distant shimmer of sand moving like waves. Suddenly, a sharp cry cut through the howling wind. Emma froze, her heart skipping a beat. The sound was human, a voice in pain, desperate and raw. She scanned the dunes again, trying to locate the source, and then saw him. A figure lay half buried in the sand, a man dressed in the traditional garb of an Apache warrior, his cloak torn, a streak of blood on his arm. He struggled weakly, trying to lift his head, and the sight made Emma's stomach twist. Without thinking, she pulled the wagon closer and jumped down into the dunes, her boots sinking into the shifting sand. The wind whipped her hair across her face, stinging her eyes, but she pressed on. She reached him just as he collapsed again, coughing and moaning. "Hey! Are you alive?" she called, her voice nearly drowned by the roaring storm. The man opened his eyes, amber and fierce, but clouded with pain. He tried to speak, but a harsh cough interrupted him. Emma saw a deep gash along his side and a twisted ankle that made his legs useless. She realized instantly that he would not survive alone. She grabbed his arms carefully, feeling the weight of his body, and pulled him toward the wagon. The sandstorm blew harder now, flinging sand like needles against her skin. Every step was a struggle, but she refused to give up. Finally, they reached the wagon. Emma eased him down onto the bench, using her cloak to wrap him as best she could. The man groaned and turned his face to hers, revealing a scar along his cheek and a jaw set in defiance. Despite the injuries, there was a quiet strength about him, a presence that made Emma instinctively trust him. "I'll get you out of this," she said firmly. "Just hang on." She opened the small kit she always carried, basic supplies, bandages, antiseptic, and began tending to his wounds. The gash along his side needed cleaning, and she worked quickly, her fingers numb from the cold. The warrior watched her silently, eyes sharp, measuring, but he made no move to resist. He only muttered a few words in his native tongue, which Emma could not understand, yet the tone carried gratitude. The storm worsened. Winds gusted in sudden, violent bursts, flinging sand and debris into the air. The wagon creaked under the pressure, and Emma clutched the edges, glancing around nervously. She knew they could not stay out in the open. She spotted a shallow cave nearby, its entrance partially obscured by rocks and sand. "We'll take shelter there," she shouted over the storm, helping the warrior to his feet. He leaned heavily on her, grimacing, and she wrapped an arm around his waist to support him. The journey to the cave was slow and agonizing. Every step was a battle against the wind and the uneven sand. Emma's muscles burned, but she ignored it, focused entirely on keeping him alive. A sudden gust nearly knocked them over, and she stumbled, cursing under her breath. The warrior's grip tightened instinctively, though he said nothing. Finally, they reached the cave entrance. Emma helped him inside and collapsed beside him, breathing hard. Inside, the storm sounded like a beast outside the rocks, howling and relentless. Emma quickly arranged some dry grasses and her cloak to keep him warm. She cleaned his wounds again, pressing her hands against the cuts to stop the bleeding. The warrior finally spoke in halting English, his voice rough. "Name Dakota," he said. "Warrior Apache." Emma nodded, trying to hide the relief in her voice. "I'm Emma. You're safe now, for the moment." She wanted to add more, but the man's eyes closed, exhaustion overtaking him. He lay on the makeshift bed, chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. As night fell, the cave seemed to shrink around her. She lit a small lamp, careful that the flickering light did not draw attention from outside. Emma wrapped herself in her cloak, staying alert. The wind outside did not abate, and she knew scavengers and predators roamed these dunes during storms, taking advantage of the chaos. Every snap of a branch or gust of sand sent her heart racing. She could not leave him, not after seeing him like this. Even if his people were strangers, even if she might be putting herself in danger, she felt an unexplainable pull to protect him. The warrior had saved lives before, Emma realized, and now it was her turn to save his. Hours passed slowly. Dakota murmured in his native tongue, half asleep, and Emma tried to catch words she might understand. Some sounded like names, some like places, but mostly they were unrecognizable. Still, she listened. Each time he moved in discomfort, she adjusted his position or pressed a cloth against a wound. Suddenly, a sharp sound outside made her freeze. Something was moving. Footsteps? She strained her ears, then caught a glimpse of shapes moving in the shadows outside the cave. Her hand went to the small laser pistol she carried. Her mind raced. Were these scavengers? Traitors? Or worse, enemies of Dakota's tribe? "Stay down," she whispered to him, though he barely stirred. She crawled to the cave entrance, peering through a narrow opening. 3 figures were moving cautiously, eyes scanning the dunes. Emma's stomach tightened. If they discovered the cave and the warrior, both of them would be in danger. She gritted her teeth and made a decision. If they entered, she would have to confront them. But first, she needed Dakota awake. She gently shook his shoulder. "Dakota, wake up. We have visitors," she said softly. His eyes flickered open, amber and alert now. He took in the situation quickly, a flash of understanding in his gaze. "Now fight," he said quietly. "Danger, you stay safe." "Not without you. We survived together." The warriors outside the cave hesitated, scanning the entrance, and then one of them moved closer. Emma stood slowly, keeping the lamp low to conceal her position. Dakota reached for his small dagger, holding it loosely in his hand, ready to defend them. The first scavenger stepped closer, but Emma's steady stance and the faint light of the lamp revealed her presence. He paused, squinting.
"Go away."
"Leave this place now." The wind howled louder, and the figures froze, uncertain. Dakota shifted slightly, standing behind her, a silent warning to the intruders. The scavengers exchanged quick glances and then, sensing the strength and resolve in the pair, slowly retreated back into the dunes. Emma exhaled shakily, relief flooding her. Dakota lowered his dagger, nodding slightly. "Brave. Woman," he said softly, a rare smile touching his face despite the exhaustion. She gave a small smile back, brushing sand from her hair. "We'll survive this storm, Dakota. That's a promise." Hours later, the storm finally began to subside. The wind grew less violent, and the dunes outside seemed calm, almost serene. Emma wrapped Dakota more securely in her cloak and settled next to him, keeping watch. She knew the journey ahead would be long and dangerous, but for the first time, she felt hope. The warrior she had saved was more than a stranger now. He was someone whose life she had touched, and somehow she felt that connection would shape both their futures in ways neither of them could yet imagine. Outside the cave, the last of the storm clouds drifted away, revealing a sky dotted with 2 suns, casting a soft, warm light across the dunes. The frontier planet, vast and unforgiving, held dangers aplenty, but inside the cave, Emma and Dakota rested, unaware that the next chapter of their lives was already beginning. The sun rose slowly over the dunes, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain. Emma stirred awake, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. Beside her, Dakota lay wrapped in her cloak, breathing steadily. His face, though still pale from his injuries, was calmer than the night before. She watched him for a moment, marveling at how the fierce warrior she had found barely alive was now slowly regaining strength. She knew they could not stay in the cave for long. The frontier planet was dangerous, and the dunes offered little protection once the storm had passed. Emma rose quietly, tending to a small fire she had managed to keep alive despite the wind. She heated water in a small metal pot, careful not to make too much noise. Dakota stirred at the smell of warmth, opening his eyes slowly. "Morning," Emma said softly. "You slept well." Dakota's lips curved slightly. A faint smile. "Better, thanks to you." Emma shook her head, pretending not to notice his gratitude. "Don't thank me yet. You're still weak. We have a long journey ahead." He nodded, struggling to sit up. Emma helped him, supporting his weight as he leaned heavily on the rocky wall. His arm was bandaged, but the pain was obvious. Each movement made his face wince. "You need to eat," Emma said, offering him a small portion of dried meat and some water. Dakota accepted it quietly, eating slowly. He looked around the cave, eyes sharp despite his injuries. Danger?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "No immediate danger," Emma replied. "The scavengers left after the storm, but we can't stay here forever. We need to move before nightfall." His gaze lingered on her for a moment, and Emma felt a strange warmth in her chest. She tried to ignore it, focusing on the tasks at hand. By mid-morning, Dakota's strength had returned enough to walk short distances with Emma's support. She wrapped a sturdy rope around his waist and guided him carefully down the dunes. Every step was difficult, but he refused to give up. His determination was fierce, and Emma admired it silently. As they moved, Dakota began speaking more. His English was broken but understandable. "Emma, Why help me? Stranger. Desert. Emma shrugged, keeping her voice steady. Because you needed help. You were dying out there. Anyone in my place would have done the same. He studied her, amber eyes thoughtful. Not everyone brave like you. Emma felt a shiver, not from the cold. I didn't do it for bravery. I did it because it was the right thing. That's all. They walked in silence for a while, the only sounds the crunch of sand beneath their boots and the occasional distant howl of alien predators. Emma guided the wagon carefully, keeping it between them and the harsh sun. The terrain was uneven, dotted with sharp rocks and deep gullies. As the afternoon sun climbed, Dakota began to recount the story of the ambush that had nearly killed him. We, scout, tribe, attacked by raiders, he said slowly. Many warriors died. I barely escaped. Emma listened intently, her hand brushing against his as she helped him navigate a rocky incline. Why were they after your tribe? She asked. Dakota's jaw tightened. Land, water, resources, outsiders greedy. His voice was low, almost a growl. We protect, honor, life. Emma nodded, understanding more about the weight he carried. This was no ordinary warrior. He was a protector of his people, a man with duty heavier than most could imagine. She felt a growing respect for him, mixed with the curiosity that had drawn her to this planet's frontier in the first place. By late afternoon, they found a shallow canyon that offered some shelter from the heat and wind. Emma decided to make camp there for the evening. She helped Dakota down carefully, and they both rested, the canyon walls providing some sense of security. Dakota lay down, breathing heavily but steadily. Emma, thank you, life, he said, looking at her with an intensity that made her heart flutter. She gave a small smile. Don't thank me yet. You're not out of danger. The night fell, and with it came the sounds of the desert, distant roars, the whisper of wind over the dunes, and the occasional screech of alien birds. Emma kept watch while Dakota slept, her hands busy with minor repairs to the wagon and cleaning tools. Despite the danger, a sense of calm settled over her. She had saved a life, and in doing so, she had formed a bond with a man who was fierce, proud, and honorable. The next morning, Dakota was stronger. He stood with minimal support, testing his balance. Emma handed him a small walking stick she had fashioned from a broken branch. He accepted it, nodding in silent appreciation. Can walk? He asked. Yes, Emma replied, slowly, carefully. We need to reach the settlement by night. As they moved through the dunes, Dakota began to notice small details. The distant rocks that could serve as markers, the paths animals had taken, the subtle shifts in wind that could signal predators. Emma watched him, impressed by his instincts and skill. Even injured, he was a warrior. She realized that his life had been one of constant survival, and now he was trusting her to guide him. Hours passed, and the sun dipped low in the sky. They reached a small oasis, a rare sight in the arid expanse of sand. Palm-like plants grew here, and water shimmered in the small pool. Emma guided Dakota to the water's edge, helping him drink.
The warrior's expression softened, a rare moment of peace crossing his features.
You trust me? Dakota asked quietly, not taking his eyes off her. Emma considered the question carefully. I trust you to survive, Dakota, and I trust that you'll make it back to your people. That's all I need to know. He nodded slowly, though his gaze lingered on her longer than necessary. Emma felt a strange pull in her chest, a connection she could not yet name. She brushed sand from his cloak and adjusted the bandages on his arm, careful and precise. As night fell, they set up a small camp near the oasis. Emma started a fire, its light casting shadows on the canyon walls. Dakota sat beside her, silent at first, watching the flames dance. Then slowly he began to speak about his people, his tribe, their customs, and their sacred rituals. His words were broken, but the passion in his voice was clear. They honor earth, sky, spirits, he said. Warriors protect family, land. She had heard stories of Apache traditions on other worlds, but hearing them from someone who lived by them added a depth she had never imagined. She asked questions, and Dakota answered, his pride and reverence clear. Hours later, the fire burned low, and Emma realized how much they had shared in such a short time. The warrior who had been a stranger was now someone she felt connected to, someone whose life she had saved and whose story she now knew. Suddenly, a noise outside the camp made them both tense. Emma grabbed her small pistol and Dakota reached for his dagger. The sounds were faint but deliberate. Someone or something was approaching. Emma whispered, "Stay low. Let me see first." She peered into the darkness and saw the faint glint of metal. Raiders, no doubt, drawn by the storm's chaos. Dakota's eyes narrowed and Emma felt a surge of admiration and fear. Even injured, he was ready to defend himself, to defend her, if necessary. The raiders stopped at the edge of the oasis, scanning for movement. Emma held her breath. Dakota's hand brushed hers for a moment, a silent warning and reassurance. Together they waited, silent, tense, and ready. After what felt like an eternity, the raiders moved on, distracted by some other noise. Emma exhaled slowly, her body relaxing slightly. Dakota looked at her, his expression unreadable but intense. "Danger, always," he said. "You, brave." Emma shook her head, smiling faintly. "You don't know the half of it." They settled back, the night once again quiet except for the desert sounds. Emma felt a sense of trust growing between them, fragile but real. She had saved Dakota's life, yes, but in return he had saved her from loneliness, from fear, from the harshness of this frontier. The next morning, Dakota was ready to move again. His strength had returned enough to walk without support, and Emma guided him toward the distant settlement. The bond between them had deepened, silent, unspoken, but undeniable. They faced the dangers of the desert together, relying on each other's skills, instincts, and courage. Emma realized that their journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, raiders, wild creatures, and the harsh desert, but she was no longer alone, and neither was Dakota. The sun climbed high, casting its warmth across the dunes. Together they moved forward, side by side, toward the unknown horizon, knowing that the choices they had made, the risks they had taken, and the bond they had formed would shape their futures in ways they could not yet imagine. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, its warm light painting the dunes golden orange. Emma adjusted her cloak and looked around the oasis. Dakota was already awake, stretching his injured arm carefully. His amber eyes scanned the desert, alert as always. Despite his recovery, a tension lingered around him, a silent reminder of the dangers they had faced and those yet to come. "We should move," Emma said softly, breaking the quiet. "The settlement isn't far now, and it's safer than staying here." Dakota nodded. He accepted her help for the first few steps, but soon he began walking with more confidence. The rope Emma had used to support him now lay coiled in the wagon, unused. His strength had returned quickly, faster than she expected. Emma felt a mixture of relief and admiration. Dakota was not just a warrior. He was resilience personified. As they moved across the dunes, Dakota's expression grew distant. He walked in silence, occasionally glancing at Emma, his mind clearly elsewhere. "Emma," he began, his voice low, "I must return." Emma stopped, sensing the gravity in his words. "Return? To where?" she asked, a flicker of concern in her voice. Dakota looked at her, his eyes intense and serious. "Tribe, my people, I needed leave, must fulfill duty." Emma felt her heart tighten. She had grown accustomed to his presence, to the quiet strength that seemed to surround him. "Duty?" she asked cautiously. "Do you mean your tribe? What about us? What about here?" Dakota's gaze softened, almost apologetic. "Here. Safe. Thanks you. But tribe call. Must go, honor, leadership, life, responsibility." Emma nodded slowly, understanding more than she wanted. The man she had saved was more than a traveler in need. He was a protector of his people, a future chief whose path had always been dictated by duty and tradition. She had known this moment would come, yet now that it was here, a sense of loss settled heavily over her. The journey to the edge of the desert was quiet. Dakota walked with purpose, occasionally pausing to adjust his bandages or to study the distant ridges. Emma stayed close, careful not to hinder his pace but unwilling to leave his side. They had faced dangers together, storms, predators, scavengers, and now, for the first time, they were facing the emotional challenge of parting. As they reached a narrow pass between two dunes, Dakota stopped abruptly. He looked out across the horizon, where the settlement lay in the distance, its structures small but visible. "Emma, wait," he said. His hand brushed hers briefly, a silent plea. "I come back. Promise. Soon." Emma forced a small smile, though her chest felt heavy. "I'll wait," she said, trying to make her voice steady. "Just promise you'll come back." Dakota nodded solemnly. "Promise." Then, without another word, he turned and began walking toward the settlement, his pace quick and determined. Emma watched him go, her heart aching. She knew he had to fulfill his destiny, but the distance between them now felt unbearable. The days that followed were long and lonely. Emma stayed near the settlement, helping wherever she could, trading goods, repairing wagons, and keeping an eye on the dunes for any signs of trouble. She thought often of Dakota, imagining his return and hoping that he would come back as he had promised. The memory of his amber eyes, the strength in his voice, and the courage he had shown during the storm lingered with her, a constant presence in her mind. Meanwhile, Dakota's journey back to his people was not easy. The desert tested him at every turn, with treacherous terrain, hidden predators, and rival clans who sought to challenge his authority. But he was determined. Every step he took, every obstacle he overcame, brought him closer to his tribe and the leadership he was destined to assume. Upon reaching the Apache settlement, Dakota was met with both reverence and challenge. The elders observed him carefully, noting the scars he bore, the wisdom in his eyes, and the stories he carried from the frontier. His survival of the storm and his return alive were seen as signs of strength and spiritual favor. Dakota's presence alone commanded respect, but the knowledge that he had been saved by a courageous woman far from the tribe added a new layer to his reputation. Dakota explained to the elders about Emma, her bravery, and how she had saved his life. His words were deliberate, honoring her courage and loyalty. The elders listened intently, their expressions a mix of curiosity and approval. In their tradition, saving a life was a sacred act, and the one who had done it could not be forgotten or dishonored. "You speak of her with great respect," one elder said, his voice deep and steady. "She is a woman of courage indeed. She has touched your fate and your life."
"She is worthy of recognition."
"Worthy, yes. I honor her. Must return soon." The elders nodded, approving his decision. In Apache tradition, the warrior who owes his life to another carries a spiritual bond, a debt of honor that cannot be ignored. Dakota's path as a future chief required him to honor this bond, even as he prepared to assume leadership of his tribe. Meanwhile, Emma continued her life at the frontier, unaware of the ceremonies and rituals taking place hundreds of miles away. She thought of Dakota often, imagining his return and wondering what he would be like after so much time and responsibility. Her heart ached with longing, but she clung to the promise he had made, trusting that he would keep it. The seasons shifted, and the desert cooled, the dunes taking on a softer hue under the twin suns. Emma's thoughts were constantly with Dakota. She had grown stronger during his absence, learning to navigate the challenges of the frontier alone, but the void left by his departure remained. Then, one day, a scout arrived at the settlement bringing news of a warrior from the Apache tribe. He was not just any warrior, he was the chief, returned to honor the bond with the woman who had saved him. Emma's heart raced as she listened to the description. Amber eyes, scarred cheek, tall and proud, a man who had faced the desert and returned victorious. The following morning, Emma saw him from a distance. Dakota stood on the crest of a dune, his silhouette strong and commanding. He had returned, not as a wounded warrior, but as the chief of his people, radiating authority, honor, and strength. His presence was both awe-inspiring and humbling. Emma felt her breath catch in her throat. Dakota's gaze found hers almost immediately. Across the expanse of sand, the connection they had formed months ago was still there, unbroken and undeniable. He moved toward her, each step deliberate, carrying the weight of his new role and the promise he had made. When he reached her, Emma could see the changes clearly. His posture was more confident, his eyes sharper, and his aura commanding. Yet beneath it all, the warmth and respect she had seen before remained. Dakota extended a hand, not just as a gesture of greeting, but as a symbol of trust and recognition. "Emma," he said softly, his voice carrying across the quiet desert, "I return, as promised." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away, smiling through the emotion. "I knew you would come back," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. Dakota nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Life, honor, duty, call, but you saved me. Always remember, must stay with now my life, yours." The warrior she had saved, the man who had survived storms, predators, and challenges unimaginable, now stood before her not as a stranger but as a leader, a protector, and a companion. She understood the depth of their bond, the trust, the respect, and the shared history that no time or distance could erase. Together, they stood on the dune, the desert stretching endlessly around them. Dakota's people began to appear, watching the reunion with reverence and curiosity. The elders nodded in approval, recognizing the sacred bond between the chief and the woman who had saved him. Emma felt a sense of belonging she had never known, not just to Dakota, but to a community that honored courage, loyalty, and life itself. As the sun set, painting the dunes in shades of crimson and gold, Emma and Dakota prepared to face the challenges ahead: political intrigue within the tribe, rival clans seeking advantage, and the ever-present dangers of the frontier. But together, they were strong. Together, they had survived storms, deserts, and uncertainty. Together, they would shape their future. And in that moment, standing side by side, they both understood that the bond formed through courage and trust was unbreakable. Dakota had returned not only as a chief, but as the man who owed his life to Emma, and she in turn owed her heart to him. The desert wind whispered around them, carrying the promise of new beginnings. The frontier was harsh, unpredictable, and full of challenges, but for Emma and Dakota, it was also a place of hope, honor, and the enduring power of trust and loyalty. The dawn broke slowly over the Apache settlement, the twin suns casting a warm golden glow across the red dunes and the sturdy wooden buildings that dotted the valley. Emma awoke with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Today felt different, weighty with anticipation, as if the desert itself was holding its breath. She rose quietly, wrapping her cloak around her shoulders, and walked toward the central gathering area of the tribe, where the elders and warriors were already assembling. At the center of the gathering stood Dakota, now fully clad in the ceremonial attire of the chief. His cloak was decorated with the symbols of his lineage, and his presence commanded attention. Emma watched him from a distance, noticing the calm strength in his posture, the quiet authority in the way he surveyed the gathering. Yet, beneath the authority, there was a softness in his amber eyes, a look that was meant only for her. As she approached, Dakota turned, and their eyes met. A silent understanding passed between them, a connection that had grown stronger over the months of separation, challenges, and shared survival. He stepped forward, motioning for her to come closer. The murmurs of the crowd faded as everyone sensed the importance of this moment. "Emma," Dakota said, his voice carrying across the assembled tribe, steady and clear. "You saved my life when I was at the brink. Because of your courage, I live. Because of your trust, I return to my people with honor. You saved me, and now I honor you." Emma's heart raced. She stepped forward, feeling the weight of eyes upon her, the judgment of the elders, the curiosity of the warriors. She had faced storms, desert predators, and raiders before, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The moment when a man she had saved, a warrior and now a chief, claimed not just her trust, but her heart. Dakota knelt slightly, a gesture of both respect and tradition. "In our way, those who save a life are bound by honor. You are bound to me, Emma. I cannot ignore this bond. I will not ignore it. Will you stand with me? Will you accept this bond? As my wife, as my equal, as my partner in life." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. Her journey had been long, filled with danger, uncertainty, and the harshness of the frontier. She had never imagined that her act of courage, simply saving a man in need, would lead to this moment. And yet here she was, face to face with the warrior who had changed her life forever. She took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes, Dakota," she said softly. "I will stand with you. I will share your life, your honor, and your path." A cheer rose from the gathered tribe, a mix of approval and celebration. The elders nodded solemnly, acknowledging the sacred nature of this union. Dakota extended his hand, and Emma took it, feeling the strength and warmth in his grip. Together, they faced the tribe, united, their bond visible for all to see. The ceremony began with the elders reciting blessings over them. The wind whispered through the canyon, carrying their words across the dunes. Dakota's family and tribe members offered tokens of respect, feathers, beads, and ceremonial stones to symbolize trust, unity, and the merging of paths. Emma felt a deep sense of belonging she had never known. This was more than love. It was acceptance, honor, and the recognition of courage and character. Dakota spoke again, his voice steady. "Emma, you have walked with me through storms, through danger, and through uncertainty. You have shown courage, wisdom, and strength. Today, I honor you not just as my wife, but as my equal, as a warrior in spirit, and as the one who will walk beside me in all things." Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest. For months she had waited, uncertain if he would return, fearing the vast distance and the responsibilities that pulled him away. Yet he had come back, true to his word, carrying not just his survival but a promise kept. The elders performed a ritual of unity, marking their hands with natural pigments from the desert and tying small cords around their wrists. The cords symbolized connection, trust, and shared destiny. Dakota tied one cord around Emma's wrist and she returned the gesture, their hands clasped together firmly. After the ceremony, Dakota led Emma through the settlement, introducing her to the people he now led. The warriors greeted her with respect, recognizing her bravery and the bond that had saved their chief. Children watched in awe, fascinated by the story of the woman who had braved the desert to save a warrior's life. Emma felt a sense of pride, humility, and belonging all at once. As the sun climbed higher, Dakota and Emma sat together atop a dune overlooking the settlement and the endless desert beyond. The wind carried a soft warmth, and the sands shimmered gold and red. Dakota reached out, brushing a lock of hair from Emma's face. "You see," he said quietly, "life is not just survival. It is honor, it is courage, it is trust. You have shown me all of these, and now we begin together." Emma leaned against him, feeling the strength in his arms and the steadiness in his presence. "I know," she replied. "I've seen it in you too, and I want to walk this path with you, no matter where it leads." Days turned into weeks, and Emma adjusted to life among Dakota's people. She learned their customs, their ways of honoring the land and the spirits, and the responsibilities that came with being the partner of a chief. Dakota taught her the art of survival in the desert, the skills of defense, and the importance of wisdom and leadership. Together they patrolled the borders of their territory, negotiated with neighboring clans, and ensured the safety of their people. Through it all, their bond grew stronger. They faced challenges, yes, harsh weather, occasional raids, and political disputes, but they did so as a team. Emma's courage complemented Dakota's strength, and his guidance tempered her impulsiveness. They were equals, partners in every sense, and their respect for each other deepened with each passing day. One evening, as the twin suns set in a blaze of crimson and gold, Dakota and Emma stood on a high dune, looking out over the vast desert. The wind carried the scent of the sand, the warmth of the day, and the quiet promise of tomorrow. "Emma," Dakota said, his voice low and steady, "we have faced storms, danger, and uncertainty. We have walked separate paths only to meet again. Now we are together, and nothing can break this bond." Emma smiled, resting her hand on his arm. "Nothing," she echoed. "We have faced the desert, the storms, and the unknown, and we survived together." The desert stretched endlessly before them, a place of beauty, danger, and endless possibility. Emma realized that this was not the end of their journey, but the beginning of a new chapter, a life filled with adventure, honor, and love. Dakota had returned not just as a chief, but as the man who owed his life to her. And she had returned not just as a survivor, but as a partner, a companion, and a respected member of his world. As the night settled over the settlement, the stars twinkled above, vast and unending. Emma and Dakota sat together, sharing quiet words, laughter, and plans for the future. They spoke of the deserts they had crossed, the dangers they had faced, and the lives they had touched along the way. And in their hearts they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them side by side, bound by trust, courage, and an unbreakable bond. The desert wind whispered around them, carrying the scent of the sand and the promise of new beginnings. Dakota's people slept peacefully, the settlement secure under the watchful eyes of their chief and his partner. Emma felt a deep sense of contentment and belonging. She had traveled alone through the harsh frontier, faced danger, and saved a life. In return, she had found trust, respect, and a love that was steadfast and true. Dakota reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining. "Emma," he said softly, "the desert is vast and unforgiving. But with you I am strong, with you I am whole." Emma squeezed his hand, smiling through the quiet joy and relief in her heart, "And with you I am safe. With you I am home." The twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the dunes. The desert was quiet, serene, and beautiful. Emma and Dakota remained on the dune, watching as the stars emerged, each one a silent witness to their journey, their survival, and their union. They had faced storms, distance, and danger, and they had endured. Together, they had found strength in each other. Together, they had discovered trust, respect, and love. And together, they would walk the path ahead, side by side, as partners, warriors, and companions, forever bound by the bond that had begun with a single act of courage in the shifting sands of the desert. The desert, vast and endless, held many secrets and challenges. But for Emma and Dakota, it also held hope, honor, and the promise of a life shared, a life built on trust, courage, and the unbreakable bond of two souls brought together by fate, survival, and as the night sky stretched endlessly above them, the wind carrying whispers of the past and the promise of the future, Emma and Dakota knew one thing with certainty. Whatever the desert or the world might throw at them, they would face it together, as partners, as equals, and as a united force, bound by honor and love.